It was past midnight when Lena reached for the phone, her fingers shaking so badly that she almost dropped it. The silence in the house wasn't the kind that comforted. It carried a weight, pressing down on her like she was drowning in stillness. Her thumb hesitated over the keypad, her mind racing with the same question she had asked herself for weeks now. What if no one comes? She pressed the buttons anyway, one by one, listening to the faint beeps and praying they wouldn't be heard over the low creak of footsteps pacing the hallway outside her door. She clutched the receiver to her chest as she waited for the call to connect. When it finally did, she whispered the words she had rehearsed in her head, but was never sure she'd say out loud. "Please, I need help." The sound of a door slamming somewhere in the house made her flinch. Her voice cracked as she repeated herself, this time louder, more desperate. And then the line went dead. She barely had time to register what had happened before the door to her room flew open, and there he was, his face flushed with anger, his hand clenched around the now severed phone cord. For a moment, neither of them moved, the tension stretching so tight that it felt like the entire house would collapse under it. Lena didn't know if she was breathing or if her body had simply forgotten how. The man, her father, smashed the phone against the wall with a force that sent pieces scattering across the floor. He didn't shout, didn't yell. His silence was far worse. He looked at her as if daring her to try again, as if his eyes alone could keep her frozen in place. Across the street, a light flickered on in one of the houses. The neighbor who lived there, a man no one really noticed because he mostly kept to himself, had woken up. He shuffled to his window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. Something didn't feel right, though he couldn't quite say why. He squinted at Lena's house, where the faint glow from a single window cut through the darkness. He didn't know her well, but something about that light, its unsteady flicker, as if someone had bumped into the lamp, kept his eyes fixed there. The next few moments unfolded like a scene from a dream, disjointed and surreal. A police car pulled into the driveway, its headlights washing over the house in harsh beams of white. Lena's father didn't move at first, and then, without warning, he turned to her. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between rage and resignation. She couldn't look at him for long, her eyes darting to the door where the faint sounds of approaching footsteps echoed through the hallway. Lena felt a strange mix of hope and terror. The people coming to the door, were they here to help her? Or would they leave like so many others had before? Walk away? Like so many others had before. Thank you for taking the time to watch this story unfold with us. Your presence here means everything. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below. And if this story resonates with you, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might find it meaningful. Your support keeps us going, and we're so grateful for it. Let's keep going. You won't want to miss what's next. The house stood at the end of the street, an old Victorian relic cloaked in ivy that twisted up its weathered walls and over its narrow, stained glass windows. It was the kind of house that felt forgotten, like it had grown tired of the world and wrapped itself in shadows. The creaky wooden floors told their own stories, ones no one wanted to hear, and the damp chill that lingered in its corners felt like it had seeped into the lives of those inside. Lena tiptoed through the dim hallway, her bare feet barely brushing against the cold planks. She was 10, but her eyes carried the weight of years, a quiet resilience buried beneath the shadows that framed her face. She had learned to speak without words, to let her small actions convey what she couldn't say aloud. One of those actions was a journal she kept hidden under a loose floorboard in the basement, its pages filled with uneven, hurried scrawls. Thoughts she couldn't risk anyone else seeing. Downstairs, her father, Anton, spoke in his usual smooth tone, the kind that could charm anyone who didn't know better. He was the kind of man who seemed to command every room he entered, the neighbors often complimenting his warmth and wit. But at home his voice changed. The warmth evaporated, leaving something cold and sharp in its place, a tone that sent a chill through Lena every time she heard it. Tonight, it was worse. Odette, Lena's stepmother, sat stiffly at the kitchen table, her hands, always busy wringing a dishcloth or smoothing her dress, gave away her unease. She rarely intervened when Anton turned his attention to Lena, but her eyes would betray a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe? Or fear? Lena wondered if Odette hated her, or if she simply didn't know how to help. Lena crouched by the basement door, clutching her stomach. Hunger gnawed at her, made worse by the damp air she'd spent days breathing in. The smell of mildew clung to her clothes, a constant reminder of where she belonged in this house. She had stolen a piece of bread earlier, eaten it too quickly, and paid the price for it now. But she couldn't think about that. Her focus was on the phone she'd managed to sneak down here earlier. She glanced over her shoulder, listening for any movement upstairs. When she was sure the coast was clear, she took the phone from its hiding spot behind a stack of old boxes. Her fingers moved quickly, dialing the numbers she knew by heart, but had never dared to call until now. The beeping of the buttons felt impossibly loud, each one like a shout in the silence. 911. What's your emergency? The voice on the other end was calm, steady. Lena hesitated for only a moment. It's my dad, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, The sound of the basement door creaking open made her freeze. She fumbled to hide the phone, shoving it behind her back as she turned toward the staircase. Anton stood there, his silhouette framed by the light from the hallway. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, she thought he might lunge down the stairs, but he didn't. Instead, he descended slowly, each step deliberate, his face betraying none of the anger she knew was simmering beneath the surface. "What are you doing down here?" he asked, his voice low, almost casual. Lena's mouth went dry. She opened it to respond, but no words came. Behind him, Odette appeared at the top of the stairs. Her face was pale, her hands clutching the railing. She didn't say anything, but her presence alone was enough to distract Anton for a split second. Lena used that moment to slide the phone deeper into the shadows, behind her. "I asked you a question," Anton said again, his tone sharpening. The silence stretched between them, unbearable and thick. Lena could feel her heartbeat in her ears, each thud a reminder of how close she was to losing whatever slim chance she had of escape. Upstairs, there was a knock at the door. The sound was abrupt, startling, and Anton's head snapped up toward it. He glanced back at Lena, then at Odette. "Don't move," he ordered Lena before heading up the stairs. His heavy footsteps echoed as he climbed, and Odette lingered for a moment longer, her eyes darting between Lena and the shadowed corner of the basement. It was as if she knew something was hidden there, but couldn't bring herself to confront it, locked within Lena. When Odette finally followed Anton, Lena exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She grabbed the phone, her fingers shaking, and considered calling again. But what if Anton found her this time? What if he didn't stop at smashing the phone? As she crouched there in the dark, She couldn't stop the questions from circling in her mind. Who was at the door? Would they help, or would they leave just like everyone else always had? Lena clutched the phone with both hands, her knuckles white as she whispered into the receiver. Her voice was unsteady, each word trembling under the weight of fear. "Please, my dad locked me in the basement. He hurts me. My stomach hurts. I think I might be sick." Her voice broke, and she pressed her free hand to her stomach, trying to keep herself steady. She wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. Her body felt weak, the hunger and damp air taking their toll. The voice on the other end responded calmly. "Stay on the line with me, sweetie. Can you tell me where you are? What's your address?" Lena hesitated. She glanced at the staircase, her ears straining for the faintest sound from above. I don't know," she admitted, panic creeping into her voice. She started to describe the house, how it looked, the ivy on the walls, the big window at the front, when she heard something that froze her mid-sentence. Muffled footsteps above her, followed by a door creaking open. The sound of her father's voice cut through the silence, low and firm. "Lena, what are you doing?" Her heart raced as she fumbled to hide the phone, pressing it against her side and willing it to be silent. She tried to stay calm, but the receiver slipped slightly in her grip, and a faint voice from the operator crackled into the stillness. The sound was enough. Her heartbeat turned her chest into a fist, and the faint film of tears filled her eyes. Anton's heavy steps thundered down the stairs. Lena felt as though her body had turned to stone, unable to move, as her father's figure filled the doorway. His eyes zeroed in on her, then the phone. The moment he reached her, his hand shot out and grabbed it, ripping it from her grasp. "What's this?" he demanded, his voice cold, almost amused, as if she had just told him a bad joke. He raised the phone to his ear, listening to the faint voice on the other end for a brief moment before slamming it against the wall. The sound of it breaking echoed through the basement, pieces scattering across the floor. He turned back to Lena, leaning in so close she could feel his breath. "No one cares about you, Lena," he said quietly, his tone dripping with venom. "No one's coming. Understand that." Lena didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat felt tight, and her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Upstairs, Odette sat at the kitchen table, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. She had heard the commotion, the sound of something smashing, Anton's voice rising just slightly. Her heart pounded as she glanced at the phone on the counter. For a fleeting moment, she considered picking it up, dialing the same number Lena had called. But she didn't. Her hands stayed still, trembling slightly as she stared at the phone. What good would it do, she thought. If they came, Anton would only get angrier. It'd make things worse for her, for Lena, for me. She tried to convince herself she was doing the right thing by staying silent, but the knot in her stomach told her otherwise. She looked toward the basement door, biting her lips so hard she tasted blood. For a moment, she almost got up, but the sound of Anton's footsteps climbing back up the stairs made her sink into her seat, her nails digging into her palms. Anton emerged from the basement, his expression calm, almost too calm. He walked past Odette without a word, heading to the living room as if nothing had happened. She watched him go, her mind racing with questions she didn't dare ask aloud. What had Lena done? What would happen next? And why couldn't she bring herself to stop it? Downstairs, Lena sat in the darkness, her knees pulled to her chest. Her hands were scraped from the jagged edges of the broken phone, but she barely felt the sting. She stared at the shattered pieces scattered around her, wondering if the operator was still on the line, if they had heard anything, if they would send someone anyway. She didn't have much hope, but it was all she had to cling to. The sudden knock at the door broke through the stillness like a crack of thunder. Anton paused in the living room, his hand tightening briefly around the armrest of the chair before he rose, a mask of calm precision settling over his face. He opened the door to reveal 2 police officers, their expressions neutral, but their eyes sharp, scanning the scene for anything out of place. Anton greeted them with his characteristic charm, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Officers, good evening. What seems to be the trouble?" One of the officers, a younger man with an air of cautious professionalism, explained. "We received a call from this address. A young girl. She sounded scared." Anton's smile widened slightly, though his tone took on a hint of exasperation. "Ah, that would be my daughter, Lena. She's been struggling lately. Losing her mother at such a young age has been hard on her. Kids these days, you know how it is. They act out, call for attention." He chuckled lightly, as if the situation were no more serious than a harmless prank. Aja winked. The officers exchanged a glance. Something about Anton's polished demeanor didn't sit right, but without evidence, they couldn't push too hard. "Would you mind if we took a quick look around, sir, just to be sure everything's all right?" the second officer asked, his tone firm but polite. "Of course," Anton replied without hesitation, stepping aside to let them in. "You'll see there's nothing to worry about." As the officers began their walk through, Anton followed closely, maintaining his air of easy confidence. Upstairs, Odette lingered by the kitchen, her eyes darting toward the officers as they moved through the house. She gripped the edge of the counter, her internal struggle evident in the way her knuckles whitened against the wood. Outside, Mrs. Layton, the elderly neighbor who had been watching the house for weeks, stepped cautiously onto her porch. She had seen the police cars pull up and had been debating whether to get involved. Finally, she made her way over, stopping one of the officers at the edge of the driveway. "Didn't want to meddle," she began in a hushed voice, her eyes darting nervously toward the house. "But I've heard things. Screaming, crying, and I've seen that poor girl. She always looks so pale, so afraid. Please, just check the basement." The officer nodded, her words adding weight to the unease already brewing. Inside, the younger officer, now near the basement door, called out, "Sir, do you mind if we check downstairs?" Anton hesitated, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he regained his composure. "The basement? It's a bit of a mess down there, but sure. Go ahead. Watch your step." The officers descended into the dim, musty basement, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they found stopped them cold. Lena was huddled in a corner, her knees drawn to her chest, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked up at the lights, blinking as if unsure whether she was dreaming. "Miss, are you all right?" one of the officers asked, his voice softening as he crouched down to her level. Lena didn't speak at first. Her throat was dry, her words stuck somewhere between fear and relief. Finally, she whispered, "He won't let me leave." Anton appeared at the top of the stairs, his tone suddenly defensive. "Officers, I can explain. Lena's been having delusions. It's a coping mechanism since her mother died. She makes things up, and I've been trying to get her help. Enough! The voice came from behind him. Odette stood there, her expression a mix of fear and determination. She's not lying. I've been too scared to say anything, but everything she's told you is true. The room fell silent. Anton turned to Odette, his mask of charm cracking as anger flickered in his eyes. But before he could respond, one of the officers stepped in, his hand resting on his belt. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning." Anton's protests echoed faintly as he was escorted out of the house. Upstairs, Mrs. Layden watched through her window, her heart heavy with a mixture of relief and sadness. Back in the basement, Lena allowed herself to be led upstairs by the officer. For the first time in what felt like forever, she saw the night sky through the living room window. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was a start. What would you have done in Mrs. Layton's shoes? Could you have stayed silent, or would you have stepped in sooner? The officers tightened their grip on Anton as he struggled against their hold, his voice booming through the quiet neighborhood. "This is ridiculous! You're making a mistake!" he shouted, his tone laced with fury and desperation. The neighbors, drawn out by the commotion, stood on their porches, watching silently as the man they thought they knew was led away in handcuffs. "You can't do this to me," Anton snarled, twisting his body in an attempt to break free. His threats echoed, but the officers remained resolute. "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." Lena, standing near the front steps, clung tightly to the arm of one of the officers. Her tear-streaked face was pale, but there was something new in her expression. Relief. She didn't flinch at Anton's threats this time. For the first time in years, his words seemed small, powerless. She buried her face into the officer's side, allowing herself to breathe deeply, as if she could finally let go of the air she'd been holding in for what felt like forever. As Anton was placed into the back of the police car, his shouts became muffled. The door slammed shut, and the car pulled away, its red and blue lights reflecting off the windows of the house. Lena didn't watch it go. Instead, she focused on the warmth of the officer's jacket against her cheek, grounding herself in this new, unfamiliar feeling of safety. Inside the house, medics worked quickly to assess Lena's condition. She sat on the living room couch, her small frame wrapped in a blanket. The medic gently checked her vitals, her bruises and the cuts on her hands. Lena winced, but didn't complain. The pain wasn't important. She was out of the basement. That was all that mattered. Later, as the house grew quiet and the officers prepared to take Lena into protective custody, she was given a moment alone. She sat by the window with her journal, the one she had hidden for so long. She opened it to a blank page and began to write, her small hand trembling as she gripped the pen. "I'm scared, but maybe I'll be safe now," she wrote, the words uneven but full of quiet determination. Maybe this is the start of something different. Meanwhile, Odette sat in the kitchen, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she spoke to the investigators. Her voice wavered as she recounted the years of abuse she had witnessed and endured, tears slipping down her cheeks as she described the moments she had chosen silence over action. She handed over evidence she had secretly collected, photos of Lena's injuries, notes Anton had written in fits of rage. With each piece, her guilt deepened, but so did her resolve to make things right. A few days later, Odette stood outside the group home where Lena had been placed temporarily. Her hands clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers as she hesitated at the door. When she was finally led inside, she found Lena sitting in a quiet room, her journal open on her lap. The girl looked up, her eyes wide, with a mixture of fear and surprise. Odette knelt down, her voice soft but firm. "Lena, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know. I should have helped you sooner. I should have stopped him. I'm so sorry." Lena didn't respond right away. She stared at the flowers, then at Odette's face, searching for something. Maybe sincerity, maybe regret. Finally, she nodded, a small but significant gesture. "Well," Odette's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out tentatively, placing the flowers on the table beside Lena. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right," she whispered. As Odette left the room, Lena watched her go, her emotions a swirl of uncertainty and cautious hope. She turned back to her journal, picking up her pen to write once more. "What do you think about Odette's redemption? Would you have forgiven her if you were in Lena's position? Let us know in the comments below." The town buzzed with quiet unease in the days following Anton's arrest. It wasn't just Lena's story that had people talking. It was the silence that had allowed it to persist for so long. The neighbors whispered in hushed tones, their faces clouded with guilt as they realized the signs had always been there, just ignored. The ivy-covered house at the end of the street was no longer just an odd, overlooked property. It had become a stark reminder of what could happen when people chose to look the other way. He had no idea what Beth and Harper said then. Mrs. Layton, the neighbor who had ultimately stepped forward, stood on her porch with a heavy heart. Speaking to a local reporter, her voice trembled as she said, "I knew something wasn't right. I heard things, I saw things, but I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. If I'd spoken up sooner, maybe that little girl wouldn't have suffered for so long. I'll carry that regret with me forever." The story spread, becoming a rallying point for the community. A local support group formed, advocating for vigilance and intervention in cases of suspected abuse. It wasn't enough to undo what had been done, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Lena began her journey of healing. Sitting in a softly lit therapy room, she stared at the floor, her hands gripping the edges of her chair. "I was scared all the time," Lena admitted during one session, her voice quivering but steady. "I thought no one would ever believe me." The therapist nodded, her expression encouraging but calm. "But someone did. And now you're safe." Lena thought about those words, repeating them silently to herself. "I'm safe." One day, Lena was introduced to a couple who had expressed interest in fostering her. They were warm, kind, and patient, understanding that trust wouldn't come easily. On their first visit, the woman handed Lena a small sketchbook, saying, "Sometimes it's easier to draw how you're feeling than to say it out loud. You can use this however you want." Lena hesitated, but eventually accepted the gift, a small smile creeping onto her face. It was the first real smile she had felt in a long time. As Lena began to settle into her new life, the legal system dealt with Anton. In a packed courtroom, the judge's voice rang clear and firm as the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. There was no commotion, no outburst, just a collective exhale of relief from those present. Anton, sitting rigidly at the defense table, showed no visible reaction, but for Lena, it was a moment of closure. The words, "He can't hurt me anymore," echoed in her mind as she watched him being led out in handcuffs. The case was over. The story ended with a glimpse of Lena's new life. She sat at a kitchen table with her foster family, a plate of warm cookies in front of her. Nearby, the sketchbook lay open, revealing a drawing of a small house with a sun shining above it. For the first time, Lena didn't feel the need to glance over her shoulder. She was safe. Lena's story is one of courage, of finding strength even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Her journey from fear to freedom reminds us of the profound impact that speaking up can have, both for those who are suffering and for those who can step in to help. Her bravery became the catalyst for change, not only in her life, but also within her community. The silence that once enveloped Lena's home broke apart the moment someone chose to act. From Mrs. Leighton's hesitant but crucial decision to Odette's eventual redemption, it became clear that no gesture is too small when it comes to protecting someone vulnerable. Lena's ability to keep hoping, even when surrounded by darkness, shows us the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Her story teaches us an invaluable lesson. No matter how quiet or small a voice may seem, it can carry a power that changes lives. It takes only one person to listen, to act, to make a difference. For those watching, this isn't just Lena's story. It's a reminder of our collective responsibility. If you or someone you know is in danger, don't hesitate. Don't assume someone else will step in. Your voice could be the lifeline they desperately need. Every person deserves safety, and every story like Lena's reminds us of the importance of breaking the silence. If her journey has touched you, consider what you would do in a similar situation. Would you take the risk to help someone? Would you trust your instincts, even when the path forward isn't clear? We'd love to hear your thoughts. What lessons do you take from Lena's story? Share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Stories that remind us of the strength we all carry within. And above all, remember, every voice matters, including yours. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Stay safe, and let's continue to stand together for what's right.